Okay, everyone, it is 2 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, and so we are going to go ahead and get started with this Converge virtual forum. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lori Peak, and I'm a professor in the Department of Sociology and serve as the director of the Natural Hazard Center, as well as of the Converge facility here at the University of Colorado Boulder. And it's my honor to welcome you here to this virtual forum. This is actually the third in a special series of forums dedicated to the 2021 Boulder County fires. And at the outset today, I want to say we had a forum. Our first forum was in January of 2021. We had a second forum in February of 2021. Those were both recorded, and Katie Murphy of the Natural Hazard Center is going to put the link to the first and second forums in the chat. We are recording this third forum, and we'll also share it after it's complete. But what I want to acknowledge at the outset of this forum today is that since we last saw one another as part of this series, we actually just observed just over a week ago the 1-year anniversary of the mass shootings here in Boulder, Colorado. Just this last weekend, nearly 20,000 additional residents of Boulder were rapidly evacuated due to the NCAR fire. And as we've talked about previously on this forums, there is still so much ongoing recovery from the 2013 floods in this county, from the 2020 Calwood fires, and from many other accumulating disasters in this beautiful part of the world. And so we really wanted to acknowledge that, and also just to say to all of the people out there, we know that many of you are not just researchers, you are not just academics, you're also, many of you are survivors of the Marshall Fire or of these other events that I've just referred to. And so we wanted to share at the beginning of this forum, there are actually several mental health resources that are available, but for those of you who may be really experiencing the accumulated traumas of these disasters, me in particular wanted to highlight the Colorado State Mental Health Crisis Line. The number is 844-493-8255. And Katie's going to put that in the chat as well, just for your own reference or for the reference of those around you. And so, as one of the things I always sign off saying is to remember to please take care of yourself and others. And I really wanted to say that at the outset of this forum, because while we are predominantly focusing on research, we know that many of these issues can be challenging. So with that, I am going to move forward with talking about what we are going to focus on today, which is progress with research coordination in relation to the 2021 Boulder County fires, as well as progress with some incredible new studies that have already been launched in the aftermath of these fires. And so, bigger picture, for those of you who are new to the virtual forums, these forums welcome researchers, but also our research partners, emergency managers, mitigation practitioners, funders, as well as community members who are interested in learning about what is happening regarding new research in relation to unfolding disasters. Our core purpose of these virtual forums is to provide a space to communicate, to coordinate, and to hopefully collaborate. And in the end, what we're trying to do, the bigger picture, is to really advance ethically grounded, rigorous disaster research that advances science, but also that brings science to practice and policy. And so we focus on sharing data, sharing information, and sharing findings that we hope can make a real difference in the world. To that end, in advance of our first virtual forum that we held as part of this series, we actually stood up a research and research coordination shared document that many people have contributed to. They've contributed information about their research projects, both planned and already launched, information about data, equipment, and other resources to be shared, as well as some people have generously shared their ideas for research opportunities, questions, or potential for collaboration. And so Katie is going to put that shared document in the chat. It's open, you're welcome to access it. And we hope if you have resources research information, anything that you want to share that you hope could be of help to others, that you will drop it in that shared document. So today, our session is actually co-convened with CoLabs, which is actually a really extraordinary organization located here in Colorado, which actually exists to connect Colorado scientists, universities, and businesses. And a fun fact that I learned actually through getting to know Dan Powers and CoLabs better is that there are more than 30 federally funded labs right here in Colorado. And many people say that we have a greater concentration of federal labs here, other than Washington, D.C., of anywhere else in the United States. So Dan can tell me if that fun fact is true or not. But Dan's going to co-convene the session today, but we also want to acknowledge our other partners that make these sessions possible, and most specifically RISE, the Resilient Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, which is located in the College of Engineering and Applied Science here at University of Colorado Boulder. And Dr. Shida Dashti has been an incredible partner. We also want to thank the Disaster Innovation Group through the Colorado State Recovery Task Force and Christopher Hudak, and also the Research and Innovation Office here at CU Boulder and Chris Yankee and his team and all that they've done to help with these forums. And so with that, I'm going to pause and turn this over to Dan Powers, who is going to introduce himself, fact check me, and also give us a brief overview of how we're going to proceed today with this forum and the 3 presentations to follow. So Dan, over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lori. Thank you, everybody. I'm Dan Powers, Executive Director of CoLabs. Lori is correct. CoLabs is a 15-year-old nonprofit, and we are a network of over 30 federally funded research laboratories and joint research institutes on the university campuses here in Colorado, plus our broader network of economic development organizations and colleges and technology companies of all types. We exist to nurture the network and fabric of federal research here in Colorado and champion and describe the ROI on taxpayer-funded research up to Congress so that these labs stay funded and stay here. The impact that they have as a source of intellectual and economic impact on our state, as well as being an asset to the country, is something that we want to maintain as a key puzzle piece to our state's, again, an intellectual and economic map here. So just a quick overview as to how we're going to go forward today. We're going to hear from 3 teams of researchers about their coordination efforts and research projects that are underway. And you can find titles and their names and organizations and further biography information on the Converged website. We're recording this, so everyone knows you'll be able to watch it again on demand again later and share with other colleagues as appropriate. Each team will have 10 minutes to present. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat as we go. We will hold the questions, however, until all 3 presentations are complete. And then the remaining time will be dedicated to answering these questions and having a bit more of a conversation and back and forth as necessary for some of your comments. As I mentioned, we will be recording this, so you'll be able to go back and find or share this again later. And if we need to, if we run out of time, we can be making some connections one-on-one with any of you all as attendees and with the given scientists who are presenting today. And then let me reiterate and just speak again about the sensitivity of this topic. We recognize that the objective and sometimes even blunt assessment of what has occurred on the properties here in Louisville and Superior, born of the fire, being spoken about from a scientific perspective can be quite clear and perhaps seem impersonal, but we definitely recognize that this is a scenario of some extreme human property and memory and other types of personal loss. And we don't mean to minimize that, but we do thank the scientists for being sincerely motivated to assess the realms of research that they've been pursuing and giving us facts as they're finding them. Thanks. And thank you, Lori, for those resources that you provided at the beginning. If this is something that is, in essence, affecting people outside of the scientific discussion. So let me introduce the first presenter. we're going to hear from Katie Dickinson. She's the Assistant Professor of Environmental and Occupational Health at the Colorado School of Public Health, and she will introduce more of her team and the research that she's going to describe. Katie, over to you.
Am I successfully unmuted?
There you go.
Yes, and your
Okay,
slides are perfect.
Great. Okay, yeah, thanks for that intro. So yeah, I'm going to talk today about what we're calling the Unified Marshall Fire Household Survey. So I'll start by, as Dan said, telling you a little bit about this team and actually how it came about. So very shortly after the fire, I'm a Louisville resident, and I do research on disasters and people's risk perceptions and behaviors. And so, you know, in the middle of navigating the event as a resident, I also was, you know, seeing very quickly some questions that I felt like, you know, me and my colleagues were well positioned to answer. And so I quickly connected with my good friend Desiree Crow at CU Denver, who's in the School of Public Affairs, Andy Rumbaugh and Betsy Albright, and we put together a rapid proposal that has now been funded that's really focused on can big ideas about resilience survive the reality of a disaster? So looking at how built environment policy decisions are changing and how the recovery process is unfolding, how individuals are making decisions about rebuilding and recovery in the midst of, and how that's interacting with, you know, decisions around building codes, which we've already seen, I think, across the 3 jurisdictions be a very big topic of focus. So our team came together simultaneously. I have a lot of good friends and colleagues at CU Boulder, and you know, I was sort of in touch with them about work they were doing looking at the air quality and health impacts. And so I know that my good friend and colleague Colleen Reed really wanted to have a survey component of that research to look at how people were, you know, what actions people were taking as they were returning to their homes, what perceptions they had around the impacts to their air quality specifically. And so we connected and started talking about coordinating on a survey. We then also had conversations with another CU Boulder-based team led by Brad Lamb that was also looking at sort of physical infrastructure, some decision-making processes. And then really this all came together at that first Converge forum that Lori organized, and it just became really clear very early on that there were a lot of questions that folks in the research community would potentially want to ask using surveys. And as somebody who's done a lot of survey research, I know that surveys are you know, time consuming and take a lot of effort, and B, that they, you know, that they impose a burden on the communities that we're asking to fill out these questions. And so, you know, I really wanted to coordinate to pool resources and make sure that we were, you know, not sending out 15 different surveys to a recently traumatized community with overlapping questions. So I wanted to make sure that our survey was strong and comprehensive. And I also wanted to make sure that we were, coordinating with local government and with community to, again, make sure that we were, you know, making the science as strong as possible and minimizing the impact on affected communities. And so through the Converge Forum, we pulled a bunch of people together. This is our jam board from one of our earliest meetings, where we really sort of mapped out like who are all of these different teams. So now we've got, you know, over 40 researchers, national, international, focusing on a lot of different topics. And we are in the midst of actually quite close, I think, to launching our first survey. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, but really trying to pull all these things together. And again, what I really want to emphasize is that we see a lot of value in having, even though it is challenging, and again, we're at the stage now of trying to like make a survey that's not, you know, 2 hours long, but having all of these when we're really trying to understand how did this event impact this community, how are rebuilding decisions being made at the individual level as that interacts with the policy choices that local governments are making, how is this impacting people's physical and mental health? Having all of these questions together in one spot, in one survey, I think is going to allow for some really interesting, innovative science questions, as well as, like I said, some good evidence and information to pass along to folks that are trying to navigate this process and make decisions. So we've held 3 virtual meetings where we've convened this survey working group, again, kind of pulling from the CU Converge and across all these different forums. Then we, again, using sort of that jam board, we said, okay, here are the different folks that are interested in these different topics. And so we assigned subcommittees. Folks did a great job. They followed their deadlines, convened together, got questions back to us, which we've now put into a Qualtric survey draft. And we are just on the verge of having that draft ready to share and for pre-testing, because we really want to get lots of feedback on the survey instrument, to make sure that it's not too long, to make sure that the questions flow okay, that they're understandable to, folks that don't spend all their time thinking about the scientific questions that we do. And so I will have an ask at the end of this, which is I would love as many people in this group as possible to test that survey out for us. And again, I should have that ready to send around in the next day or so. So this is the plan for implementing the survey. We are planning to send the survey out to all of the homes that are within the fire perimeter, in addition to a random sample of homes at varying distance bands from the fire perimeter up to 2 miles. So that's going to get us, most of the communities of Louisville and Superior, as well as, folks that are within the vicinity of the fire within Boulder County. Where possible, we have put in a request through the system that Lori set up to access the contact information for folks with damaged and destroyed homes. And if we are able to get that information, we will plan to contact those folks by email where we can, which will make our implementation a little bit easier. For other folks, we have already compiled the database of tax parcel records, and so we'll be doing recruitment based on mailed invitation letters that will send folks to that with a QR code or URL to our online survey. We will be able to offer incentives, gift cards to survey participants. We have graduated scale, so we're offering a slightly higher incentive for folks that have damaged or destroyed homes, and anticipating a 25% response rate, which is a little bit of guesswork at this point. We are guessing that we'll have about 400 completed surveys within the fire perimeter and about 300 outside the fire perimeter. So as I said, we're getting very close to being able to launch this survey. We really just have to go through that pre-testing process and get everything buttoned up. And then we're hoping to launch by mid-April. And then we will do 2 follow-up waves with the same group of participants. And so again, we really want to look at how these decisions are changing over time, how perceptions of different policies, and how folks are doing, right, in terms of their physical and mental health. So that's the plan. This is this was up a little bit in that initial Jamboard, but this is the list of the different topics that are covered in our survey instrument. Where possible, we've pulled from items that are published and validated and have been used in other contexts. And then, of course, we've tried to make sure that we are striking that balance between having questions that are meaningful and relevant for this particular question, but also that allow us to answer bigger questions about this type of disaster and the processes that are involved in that. So again, putting out a call for all hands on deck to help us test out the survey. We really want to get a sense for how long it is, and I never have an easy time doing that. There's, we have different types of, some questions won't be asked of people who lost their homes, right? We're not going to ask them questions about, cleaning their home when they got back, and and likewise, we have questions about rebuilding that we will be asking of folks that lost homes. So there are skip patterns and various different things that make it a little bit hard to judge survey length without having a bunch of folks test it out for us. And then again, just the content and the flow, question wording, all of that. So I will send that. You can all let me know what the best way is to distribute that out to this group, but I'll send a survey link and then a link to a Google Doc that has the survey so folks can go through and comment kind of as they're going through the survey. And then, we also, through this forum, through any other recommended channels, we plan to put together sort of technical reports with the summary of survey responses shortly after each survey concludes. We'll certainly be looking to share our results with anyone who is interested in seeing them. So thanks for the opportunity to chat today, and I'm happy to connect with anyone to answer more questions.
Thank you, Katie. Right. Hello, everyone. This is Dan Powers again. Thank you. And we did get a couple questions. We'll circle back to those after all the presentations have completed. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Janice Cohen. And Janice, if you need to share your screen, please bring that information up. Janice is a senior research scientist at the University of San Francisco, and is also a project scientist in the Mesoscale and Microscale Meteorology Laboratory at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. Janice, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Well, thank you for the introduction. This was material I drafted to brief my laboratory at the Mesoscale and Microscale Meteorology Laboratory at NCAR. We have a wide variety of weather expertise, but people were not familiar with the fire behavior aspects of it. I did some simulations of the event shortly after the fire. Not that this was challenging as a wildfire behavior case. It's very simple, and most of the current tools and operational models in place now should do a good job on it. But I knew there would be a large amount of community interest, and there were other aspects overlapping, other projects I'm working on that might benefit from it, and some output from the model that I thought other people might be able to use. Where am I? I'll make this go there. So there were, on December 30th, there were 2 fires ignited. The Middle Fork fire ignited around 10 o'clock north of Boulder at Middle Fork Road and Highway 36, just a block or so south of the Greenbrier, around 10 a.m. And of course, the Marshall fire ignited around 11 a.m. It looks now that there were 3 origins to it. The cause is still under investigation. Although the Middle Fork fire was rapidly extinguished, the Marshall fire, of course, spread throughout the day with tremendous losses until it was put out largely by Mother Nature with increasing moisture and finally snow. There are 2 components to it. The early fire spread carried by grass as a surface wildland fire driven by strong, dry southwesterly winds along the drainages on the plains. And I think the drainages are an important component of understanding why the fire behaved as it did. It resembles a lot of the California events we've studied, where there's a stable air near the surface, so it resists vertical motion. But driven by strong winds, this cold air tends to hug in drainages and be driven rapidly through it by the strong winds following it. Became established in Cottonwood Litter and Marshall's Creek. As I drove through the area later, some of the most heavily damaged vegetation were the cottonwoods, which you wouldn't normally think would burn, but because of all the litter underneath them, they were able to build a higher intensity flame, longer flame lengths, and create tree mortality, while even nearby some of the more native species, the grass burned around them, but the trees where they were separated only had their bases scorched and will probably survive. The second component, of course, not much more than an hour later, the fire transitioned into a moderate density urban fire, interspersed with greenways. So if you look at the map of the fire drawn by the incident, it's much more, has much more tendrils out into the community. And these represent where the fire spread through really what you would consider trivial topographic changes, ditches, drainages, factors who wouldn't necessarily even notice on a day-to-day basis. But even out here on the plains, there was a topographic effect shaping the winds, keeping the fire contained to these topographic features, one of which was this Coal Creek drainage and bike path that goes under Highway 36. The second component was very different from the wildland fire spread. It was more of an urban fire spread between structures, and it has many factors, including embers, flammable vegetation, and the housing density itself. But the seasonal moisture anomalies are not a primary factor. If you look at the fire progression from satellite active fire data, we use the VIIRS Visible and Infrared Imaging Radiometer Suite instrument. The I band has 370 meter pixels, and we get it twice daily from each of 2 instruments. And I have the imagery here from that day. The red pixels indicate actively burning fire. Brick colored pixels are areas that were previously active but are not currently showing active fire. Blue is the on-the-fly detection of water bodies, and gray pixels identify cloud or thick smoke. And here are the images throughout the day. The fire spreads rapidly. As you get to later in the afternoon and early into the December 31st, the areas that are actively burning are primarily, unfortunately, the housing structures, which take a while. Once they ignite, they take a while to release the heat that they're going to. The partner weather characteristics, of course, there were strong winds along the Front Range, a seasonal downslope event, afternoon low relative humidity with a strong diurnal component shown in the weather data in the lower left. This was not the only period like this that month. There were other periods where we had a bit of wind and periods where the relative humidity dropped into an area that would make the fire susceptible or the fuel susceptible to burning. The atmospheric stability was very stable. It resists vertical motions. If we look at a cross section through potential temperature, we had a feature people refer to as a rotor. So the downslope winds, they're strong near the mountains, but there's a bit of a reverse flow out on the plains. And that had an impact on some of the imagery we saw from today. In this cross section, what I'm plotting is potential temperature. If it were all one temperature, that would be neutrally stratified, but it increases with height. That's stable air. And it outlines this kind of a cap over the smoke. And we saw that in the smoke from the day. The picture at the bottom is flipped, but you can see how the smoke is trapped by the stability of the air with some of the heat from the fire poking clouds through the top of it. Just briefly, some information about the fuel. We talk about surface fuels. The particle size determines how quickly the fuel responds to moisture. Grass is a 1-hour fuel. Imagery in the lower left. It comes to equilibrium with the air around it in an hour, and even much more quickly when it's ventilated by a strong dry wind. What we often measure with our fuel sticks out at the RAWS stations are the 10-hour fuel moisture. That's the second picture on the bottom. These are slightly bigger pictures, and these measure fuel of sizes that come to equilibrium over 10 hours. And these smaller particles are ones that we consider important for fire spread. The 10-hour fuels on December 30th, the closest sensor I could find in the raws with a fuel moisture measurement was in Franktown, which is southeast of Denver. But you can see there's over this couple week period, there are trends that have to do with the weather, jumps when precipitation comes, but there's still a strong diurnal component to the variability in the hour-to-hour fuel moisture. And on this day was one of those days when it took a dip into a degree of dryness that would spread fires rapidly in grass. But it wasn't extremely dry. I mean, if we talk about it got drier and drier and drier, the people who said it was the drought, no, that's not it. There's a lot of day-to-day variability, and it can come into agreement quickly, or into conditions quickly. For comparison, fire the other day, the Sugarloaf Ross station had some information on fuel moisture. And if we look at the past 2 weeks, again, we see this variability with interruptions by precipitation events and a drift towards drier fuels, day-to-day diurnal variability. And on the afternoon that the fire started, it had dipped into a fuel moisture regime that we would say would be sufficient for spreading grass fires. Simulations I did with a coupled weather wildland fire model, COFFEE. I have a number of case studies and the link in the lower left. You can look at it later if you like. I did simulations of this event. The near surface winds and the heat flux from the fire are at left, and that cross section of potential temperature and the near surface winds are in the imagery at right. So you can see how the atmosphere above is changing with time, and also how it's creating these pulses of wind at the surface. In this simulation, the lower fire on the lower part of the screen is the Marshall fire, ignited at 11 p.m. But I also kept the Middle Fork fire, which ignited at 10 a.m. And this shows, so the fire spreads, the Marshall fire spreading into Superior and Louisville here, and it's being damped out the later periods of the day as the moisture increases. But what was interesting about this event, that we had 2 ignitions that day, and all the firefighters jumped on the Middle Fork fire. And as bad as that day was, I think we can perhaps be thankful that they caught the other one, because it might have caused even more destruction than the one that did. I'm following up this work with some if we look at the, let's see, the heat released from the fire, if you'd watched the potential temperature closely, you wouldn't have seen much penetration of the fire into the atmosphere. That's because we're not including the housing, the heat release from the housing fuels. And we don't really know how to do that in wildland fire modeling. It's traditionally unburnable in the fuel data we get. We might treat it as grass to represent the fuel that actually does carry the fire through the communities. But I've begun to include some tests in some other fires, Tubbs fire in Santa Rosa and the Camp Fire, to see, is it possible that the heat release from the fires is enough to alter the wildland fire dynamics? And it turns out, yes, in many cases it is, particularly when you have a mass release of heat from a community. So I'm testing that here, although it's not quite ready to do it for exactly the houses that burn. So I'm treating it as if they were all consumed. And the way we do that is to treat the community with an
Janice,
Yep.
just checking in really quick, just about 1 more minute for the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're looking at how this might have created some of the fuel loads that the fire worlds that were created. This case is more interesting as an approach to risk. I look at it as having an underlying susceptibility, a weather pattern that could spread fire, and a fortuitous ignition that can take advantage of that. And the Marshall Fire is interesting because we had a snowless fall where the fuel moisture was low enough to carry a fire. And another necessary factor was these seasonal windstorms. And really, if we want to look at how these stack up in risk, there's a lot of year-to-year variability in each of these factors. So we're trying to make a climate-aware approach to risk that's based on understanding of how these physical processes affect fire behavior. So it's more of a joint probability of these usual seasonal factors coming together at the right time rather than extreme, like a drought building to more extremity, or climate change, overall temperature changes. So I think this is a different approach to risk that might allow us to have a more reasonable estimate of how much at risk we are for this type of event.
All right. Thank you very much, Janice. And I note that you had there the chilling thought. This is part of the sobering insight that we're getting from research such as yours. Thank you. Next, we are going to hear from Tim Giuliano. He's a project scientist at NCAR's Research Applications Laboratory, and he will describe his project and the team members he's working with. Over to you, Tim.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Dan. Is it possible? Oh, there we go. Okay, great. Share screen. Is it showing up okay?
You know, we see
in
it,
the
but not in
slideshow
the
just yet.
slideshow version.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Let's try that. Is that good?
Yes, there
Okay.
we go. You're full
Great,
screen
thank
now.
you. Awesome. Okay, well, again, thanks for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity to present this research today. Today I'll be talking about numerical simulations of the Marshall Fire and specifically looking at the meteorological impacts as well as their role in the evolution of the fire. So I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are listed here who have contributed quite a bit to this work, as well as some colleagues at University of Nevada, Reno. This work's funded through NSF, as well as through some free time. I live in Louisville myself, so this is a really important event for me, and so it's certainly been an interesting endeavor trying to understand more about the meteorological impacts. So, getting right into it. One of the fundamental concepts for wildfire behavior is the idea of the fire behavior triangle. And so with the fire behavior triangle, there are three main components that impact behavior. The first is weather, including wind, temperature, humidity, precipitation. The second is fuels, such as the type and the arrangement and some of the things that Janice just alluded to. And then there's also topography. And I think in the Marshall Fire, most folks would agree that weather was the dominant factor in controlling the fire evolution. But, of course, fuels were very important, allowing it to progress rapidly initially and then transitioning into the urban fire setting, as Janice had alluded to. And while topography may not directly affect the fire spread much in this situation, it certainly does have an indirect impact on the winds and shaping the winds, the upstream topography, as well as some of the local, more gradual slopes that Janice was just talking about. So I should also stress that the wildland-urban interface, or the WUI, presents a significant challenge for current coupled fire weather models, and I'll briefly touch on that at the end. So just getting right into it, the atmospheric flow on this day was quite complex. Here I'm showing a picture that was taken from the northwest of the fire about an hour after the initial ignition. So east is to the left in this picture and west is to the right. The star shows the fire kind of ignition point, or the active burning area. And we can really see the smoke plume as an indicator of the winds on that day. So we had strong westerly flow, right near the fire. And then we had this this kind of jump region downstream, which was shown in some of Janice's figures as well. So the smoke, traveled along this intense updraft, which we have pretty good reason to believe is a hydraulic jump, and I'll be showing some evidence for that. And then it kind of, moved downward and kept going out of this picture. But basically, this is just showing the really complex nature of the environment on this day. So the main research goals of our work is to understand the roles of the mesoscale and microscale meteorology on the fire evolution. Mesoscale is on the order of tens of kilometers and microscale is on the order of hundreds of meters. We also want to determine the performance of current state of the science coupled fire weather model called WRF-Fire using a large eddy simulation approach. We also want to evaluate ember spotting potential, as well as possible additional burning due to embers. And this is a parameterization that was recently implemented in the WRF-Fire model. But ultimately, the goal is to improve modeling capabilities to better inform future operational wildfire forecasting efforts. So this is, generally speaking, a short-term forecasting goal. So I'm going to jump right into the results since we're sort of limited on time here. So here I'm just showing animations from our model output. On the left here, I'm showing just one ignition just north of Marshall Road at 11:10 a.m. And then on the right, I'm showing additional ignitions on both the north and south side of Marshall Road, as well as potential ember ignitions on the other side of 36, because in the present models, we don't have burnable fuel along the highway, of course. And so the fire must kind of get on the other side of the highway through firebrands or embers from likely from structures, considering that the fuels were grasses. But here we can see really the initial rapid spread through mostly grassy fuels, ember spotting across Highway 36. And I should note that our model simulations, or at least this one in particular, generally underestimated the fire spread further south into Superior, and this could be due to spotting or also to potentially the winds in that area. So along with the fire spread from our model, we're able to provide details about the atmospheric flow. And if you recall the photograph that I showed of the strong westerly winds and then going into the hydraulic jump, we're kind of trying to some extent replicate that here from the model output. So this is from the opposite perspective. So the left side is now on the west, the right side is to the east. And on the top, I'm showing the east-west winds. So the dark reds are from left to right, strong winds. The lighter colors and the blues are either really weak winds or reverse flow, so flow going from right to left. The middle is an indication of small-scale turbulence that could be generated in that jump area. And then the bottom is a metric for the smoke. So really, the ingredients that are needed for a hydraulic jump are strong westerly winds and a thin layer upstream. And so we can really see that as the flow is coming off of the topography. Weaker winds generally in a deeper layer downstream, and sometimes they're reversed. And then the generation of turbulence, where the flow transitions as you lose your mean kinetic energy and transition into turbulence. And so we do need to do some more kind of theoretical analysis to make sure that's what we're seeing, but it does seem as though the model is capturing this flow structure. And also, we did a comparison with some of the surface wind stations in the area. Here I'm just showing time series of wind speeds at some different weather stations. Top left is near Table Mesa, about 2.5 kilometers from the ignition. Top right is Louisville, and the bottom ones are in different locations in Superior. So the take-home message here is the red lines are the model, and the blue and the greens are basically the minimum and maximum values that were observed, the wind speeds and the wind gusts. And so we really just want to see good agreement between the red line and the blue and the green lines. And in general, we do see that. We tend to capture these higher wind periods at the beginning of the event, and then the decrease in wind speeds later. So we're going to do some more analysis with that, but at kind of first order, it seems that the model is doing pretty well in capturing the winds. So another thing that's really exciting that we're looking at are radar observations from the event. So these are observations from a radar deployment that occurred specifically for the fire. And so what I'm showing here is a radar image, the radial velocity. So the star is the location of the radar. And what happens is the radar sends out pulses in 360 degrees at different elevation scans. And the radar beam hits a smoke plume and it basically returns the signal. And so we can get an idea basically of how fast the flow is, because we have smoke particles for the radar to see. And so really the main point here is that the radar is capturing the stronger westerly flow in the reds and the oranges here, that strong kind of westerly component winds. And then the blues and the greens are reverse flow regions. And so it does seem as though the radar is capturing this reverse flow region, and it seems to occur approximately 300 meters to 800 meters to a kilometer above the ground, which is qualitatively pretty similar to what we were seeing in the model, but we do need to do some more in-depth analysis with that. So here's my summary and just some quick thoughts on an outlook. So the fire initially spread rapidly through mostly grassy fuels before basically ember spotting became more important toward the urban interface, and then eventually moving into this urban zone. Our war fire simulations appear to reproduce the highly variable flow quite well during the fire event, which you need to represent the winds well in order to get the fire spread to be accurate on in this type of event. And so some next steps are to more thoroughly evaluate the model using the radar data, as well as conducting additional sensitivity studies and then disseminating the results. And just some thoughts that I had, to enhance these shorter term, approximately minutes to day timescales, fire decision support, especially in the wildland-urban interface. We really need a better representation of the urban fuels in these coupled models. As Janice alluded to, they're really not there in the model. They're just shown as unburned fuels. And so we need a good idea of what these fuels are actually like. More observations of ember spotting events to improve our parameterizations. And then also models capable of accounting for fine-scale flow features in the urban landscape. These small-scale features that may develop or arise due to buildings and other structures could be important at the local scale. And so that really needs to be accounted for in these types of events. And so I thank you, and I'll take any questions, comments, or if anyone has any thoughts in collaboration, I'm happy to engage. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim. Okay, we're going to check out there were a few questions that came in. I'd like to circle back and pose those to the various presenters. We'll go back to Katie. I think if I have enough time, I'll go between questions that go to each of the presenters. And if there's any left over, we can be sharing those. So Katie, could I bring you back up or just alert you that I'll be asking you a question here, reading from the screen if there's anyone on the phone who wants to, who can't read this directly themselves. It regards the Institutional Review Board, and the question from Lori is, since so many researchers from so many institutions are involved, how are you handling that IRB process?
That's a great question. And it's a bit of a work in progress. We have approved IRB protocols from CU Anschutz, the COMERB, Colorado Multiple Institutional Review Board. So that's the relevant IRB for my campus, and then also for CU Boulder's IRB. So we have those two approvals. And then for the larger network, so I guess what I would say is, I feel confident working from those two IRBs on the survey distribution and implementation. And then I think for the data access, that's where I'm going to have to check in with all of the different researchers to make sure that they, and with our IRBs to see how they want us to handle that. If they want us to just add them as names onto our IRB, or if they need to have their own protocols. We also haven't fully discussed, which research teams will have access to the identified information versus the de-identified. And so that piece of it with the data sharing for the larger group is still a work in progress. And yeah, I think if other folks have navigated this, I've been in similar situations for a COVID project that I was involved in across many universities. But I know all of our IRBs work a little bit differently and have different preferences. So that's where we are with that right now.
Okay. Let me build on that with one more question, and then Janice, I have a question for you as well. And please, you could also hit the raised hand function if you would like to actually ask a question just directly without putting it in the chat. Also, Katie, let's see, was the incentive payment conditioned upon the participant completing the survey or simply opening the link and answering a few questions? And how did you ensure that participants actually provided complete responses, or I suppose otherwise something worthy of analysis?
Yeah, good question. So the way that we currently have planned to do this, again, we haven't implemented the survey yet, is to have folks enter their contact information at the end of the survey, and folks that so they'll have to get to the end of the survey, enter their email address, and we'll send electronic gift cards to those email addresses. So that's and I think we will provide an option for folks if they don't want to provide an email address, they can provide a mailing address, but they'll have to get down to the end of the survey. Again, we'll have the information right up front, in the invitation letter and at the beginning of the survey, indicating that this incentive will be paid when they complete the survey, so that they know that that is sitting there waiting for them. But they'll have to get all the way through the survey to submit it to let us know, or to qualify for that incentive.
Okay. Thank you. And then Janice, I have a question that was from the chat, and then I'll be taking a question from Joshua Putterman, one of the audience members. Janice, does your modeling show how the fire could have jumped Highway 36, which I think is 8 lanes near McCaslin?
Simulation I showed used atmospheric grids of 370 meters. The fuels are refined further, but still at that scale, we're not resolving fuel breaks such as roads.
Okay.
So at that scale, I mean, they tend to jump roads and anyway, so it's really, if you want to go down finer, you really have to include the embers specifically. But at this scale, we're generally looking at very large landscape scale fires, and when we go down to finer scales, I think the modeling approach itself breaks down. But thank you.
Okay. All right, and Joshua, would you like to unmute yourself and tell us who you're looking to ask a question to?
Yeah, this question is for Janice, and I also want to thank CoLabs for pulling this together. Thank you, Dan. Janice, I didn't pick the last paragraph of your presentation because I heard you mention something about the data not reflecting climate change, heating or cooling. Did I miss something there?
I think the most important aspect of this fire was the risk of future events, and a lot of people jumped to say it was climate change or a drought that was ever deepening. I wanted to emphasize that I look at it a different way from a physical perspective, and that's that these conditions can come together very quickly. So although these factors each have an impact that changes over time, I mean, the frequency of the wind events, the snow cover on the ground, and there's a lot of variability from year to year. It's a different perspective in that we look at the joint probability of each of these factors happening. And from that perspective, it could be the possibility of such a fire is really much more common, I think, than we really realize. That we don't need conditions that get worse and worse and worse. But what our dry fall produced was a number of days when it was possible, just waiting for that wind event and that badly placed ignition to come together and create such a disaster.
Okay. Our data sets are a little different from that, but that's for another discussion. But thank you for your answer.
Okay, happy to talk offline.
Thank you, Josh. All right, then I have a question for Tim and perhaps Janice as well. Is there a critical wind speed where home-to-home spreading of the fire becomes really hard to avoid? Maybe Tim, you could take that first, and Janice also address that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a number off the top of my head. That may be something that we really don't even know, to be honest. I mean, something that we would have to probably learn from previous fires. Laboratory settings probably wouldn't help too much in those scenarios. But I may defer to Janice. She has quite a bit of experience with historical fires, so.
Well, this came up in a discussion with Joe Scott, who is developing a further database of fuels for the community. It seems, I can't say when it will happen, but it does seem like it doesn't happen unless it's at least 20 miles per hour that you have this incursion and house-to-house spread.
Right.
And I'll just add, this goes to part of the last point that I had, trying to incorporate some of these high resolution fine scale models, talking grid spacings on the order of meters that can resolve buildings and look at these really fine scale flows to better understand these interactions.
Okay, we have about 2 minutes left, and I'll see if I can get in 2 questions. Janice, there was another one posed to you, and it's, what are the likely causes of the Marshall Fire? You had mentioned that there were 3 being investigated.
There were 3. When I did the simulation, I used the one from the tribe's property. I talked to the people across the street. I'd done a dog rescue home check for them, and they'd seen the people out there pit burning every morning. So it wasn't a surprise to them when the fire came down the hill to their home. But when I looked at the reporting, I was contacted by Robert Vaughn of 9 News. He had aerial imagery that showed the fire spreading from a triangle point from 3 separate locations. And it's not obvious how one would have hopped to cause the other. So it does look like there were 3 points of origin. Although the causes are still being investigated.
All right, thank you. But I know everyone were quite interested to know what the relevant authorities end up coming up with as a ultimate determination there. Well, Lori, I think with just a minute left, I might leave the other question. I think there's one other question in there that we could circle back specifically for Tim and look to make a more formal wrap up, and particularly just a thank you to all of the presenters, the scientists who gave these quick overviews, and to all of you who made some time this afternoon to hear the latest updates. Please know that our next forum is going to be on April 13th. And also you can see a video. This will be available on demand, plus the prior forum webinars are also there for you to review and get more detail. How about Lori? I'll turn it over to you then for the final comments. Thanks, everybody.
Just echoing Dan's thanks. Thank you to all of the participants who joined us today, and a special thanks to the presenters for the work that you're doing. And we hope that you will join us on April 13th for our next virtual forum. We have 4 presentations that are scheduled for that afternoon, and we just wish you all well. Thanks to CoLabs for co-convening this one, and thank you to the National Science Foundation for the support of the Converge facility that makes these forums possible. And so I hope that you are all taking care of yourselves, taking care of those around you. We wish you well, and we'll look forward to seeing you on April 13th. Thank you, everyone.
Great. And
Thank you.
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks
Thank
to
you.
those of you who just got in a couple last questions. I think we'll share those with the presenters and see if we can make a direct connection for you by email to follow up on that.
Yes, and we will make sure and post those on the virtual forum page too with the rest of the chat. So thank you. Thanks, Stan.
Okay,
Thanks.
thanks,
Take
Lori.
care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.